Very good evening, friends. Meeting again in the session of Robert's philosophy, and we have started discussing about a very important chapter from H.A.Robert, the phenomenological viewpoint. In fact, it is chapter which is necessary for the homeopathic students to learn how one should go ahead and develop further homeopathy. If we'll focus on the homeopathy with the help of such a scientific aspect, then definitely it has its own value and people will understand the scientificity behind the homeopathic science. Generally, we are still using the old words, old terminologies, and because of which it is rather difficult for the people of a modern science or modern medicine to accept the homeopathy. And it is possible on that day when you will start talking in their language or in the language of the world. And for that purpose, Robert has tried his level best in this chapter. He has started explaining about all those things. He has comparing the laws of homeopathy. He is using the words of homeopathy with the scientific term. And when we reach to that level, we have to talk in the form of energies. It is not word dynamic energy, but instead of dynamic energy, we have or vital energy, we have to use whether it is potential or kinetic. The words which are used by the modern science, physics or physicist, biologist or chemist, the word of these are the words which they knows properly. And then they can understand what exactly you want to say. So he is explaining in this chapter all those things at the same time comparing the laws of physical science or material science with the laws of homeopathy. When we deal with the human being, we deal with the dynamic human being as well as material human being. Depending upon the situation, if there are physical problems and if you are thinking about the physical entities, then we have to use the physical laws. And when we are dealing with the mind or when we are dealing with the rest of the components of the human being, then definitely we have to think about the laws of dynamics. It is a balance which we have to understand and which we have to explain to the people. Then it is possible to understand the homeopathy. Generally, mistake happens that people starts applying the physical laws with the dynamics and dynamic laws with the physics, and then there is definitely a confusion which arises. So one must understand that laws of material science are different and laws of dynamic science are different. We don't interfere one with the others. And if it is so, then we can understand better human being and then we can have a very good communication with the peoples of other side. We were there on page number 261. Let us go ahead with the second paragraph. In reality, we are continually in balance between dynamic laws and statistical laws, and which are defined by Reiser as follows. So what he is saying is very important. The duality of nature's natural law is stated in terms of contrast between dynamical and statistical law. The first type, dynamical laws, are causal laws, giving rigid determination and predictability. And the second type, the statistical laws, yield more probability and introduce indetermination into the calculation. This is basic difference between the dynamic laws and statistical laws, or which are called to be material laws. The things becomes rather simple when we have to use the material science. We are damn sure that 1 plus 1 is equal to 2, 2 plus 2 is equal to 4, because it's a matter of a matter. So we can very easily calculate, we can very easily predict, we can very easily definitely say, yes, this will happen in this way. Because in the physical form, this is possible. So if you calculate anything, how many hands, how many fingers are there, you can read and say, and you can watch and say that, yes, 10 fingers are there. Because it is possible to watch with the thing which are visible, which are wettable, which have their own material, and that's why it becomes or it comes under the sphere of statistical law. But when the question relates to the mind of the human being, with the emotions of the human being, with the love, with the anger, with the jealousy, you cannot calculate how much anger do you get. How what one can say? He can explain it in probable words, but those are all probabilities because material, the dynamic things you cannot calculate. There is no addition, there is no subtraction. So these are the things one must know, that the things which are comes under the dynamics should utilize the dynamic laws. And that's why when we do or when we prepared a law of minimum dose, we cannot come to the specific minimum dose. We say that the dose should be so minimum so as to arouse vitality in a deceased individual. So the law itself is so specifically mentioned that it varies from individual to individual. You are not damn sure, yes, this is called as law of minimum dose. So 1x potency is minimum potency. You cannot. For one patient, it might be a 1x. For another patient, it might be 10x. For another patient, it might be 1030C. Another patient, it might be CM. For another patient, it might be 50 millisiemen. You cannot predict. It depends upon the situation. It depends upon that state. It depends upon that specific time. So dynamical laws and the statistical laws, we have to understand according to the situation. A dynamical or causal law eliminates contingency and implies ability to visualize the mechanisms in operation. But in statistical laws, concerned with the calculation of mean value, the individual element of statistical ensemble are not studied. So there are differences between the statistical laws and dynamic laws. Dynamic laws, you cannot come to the confirmed thing. You cannot, there are always all the probabilities depending upon that specific time and that specific situation. But things are absolutely clear cut when you think about these material laws or statistical laws. The atomic processes of microscopic mechanisms are reversible, sometimes periodically, and subject to necessary causal laws, whereas the macroscopic states represent the mean value of large number of individual processes of a statistical aggregate. The things which are big enough, you can measure and you can apply the statistical law. That's why in material science or modern science, it is very definite to calculate the dose of a medicine. They calculate it in a 5 milligram per kilogram of body weight. They calculate 10 milligram per kilogram of a body weight. And they are damn sure, yes, if the weight of the patient is, if the child is there 10 kg of the weight and 5 milligram per kilogram of body weight, then the child will require 50 milligram. So it is very easy to come to the conclusion. But it is not true when you are dealing with the dynamics. When you are giving the dynamic medicine, you cannot calculate on this basis. So you have to depend upon susceptibility of that child. You have to take into consideration what's its disease. You have to take into consideration whether is there any pathology. You have to take into consideration child's itself is one of the important entity in the selection of medicine. So one by one, you have to go and finding it out all things, and then you come to the probable minimum dose for that patient. So it depends ultimately on the individual case, and these are differences. One must be very thorough in understanding so that there will be no confusion or there will be no problem happens to be there. It is in this balance between the dynamical and statistical laws that we find our margin of error in the application of homeopathic principle to our patient. The law of least action is one of the dynamical laws upon which homeopathy was postulated and by which it has been affirmed. We acknowledge this law along with law of similars and various other causal elements having to do with basic and cyclic action in natural process, which in turn explain the processes of homeopathic action. So, the law of least action. Law of least action is stated by in the physics only. But the law of least action again is very it is said that quantity of action, quantity of action is required in order to make a change is least possible. This is the law. Here, definite word is not used because you cannot predict depending upon the situations of dynamics. You cannot say. It varies. It depends upon speed also. It depends upon the movement also. And when such things are there which are changeable, the least dose is always you cannot calculate. It depends at that specific time. And with this law of physics, the our law of minimum dose has been derived by Hahnemann. So he has given importance to the laws which are used over there in the physics, in the chemistry, and accordingly he has prepared his own law. And where also, he also mentioned the same thing, the dose should be so minimum so as to arouse the vitality in a disease danger. He has not said it is what dose exactly it is. And it cannot be. He cannot or anyone cannot. These things one must understand. Then he goes, it has been argued that if homeopathy is the application of natural laws, the results of our remedies should be uniform. There should be less variation in the details of proving. The length of action of any potency should be the same in all cases. It has been blamed on homeopathy that there should be a very specific action which you should be able to derive. But when we deal with the dynamics, is it possible? Yes, one prover can show the action for 10 days, another prover can show the action 20 days, another third one may prove shows it for 15 days. Because the dose which you have given is also dynamic and on whom you are proving is also dynamic. You are not measuring the material thing, you are measuring the dynamic action of the remedy on the dynamic human being, and you cannot come to the conclusion. And that's why there should be less variation in the details of proving. The length of action of any potency should be the same in all cases, no matter how careful the practitioner may be. He knows from bitter experience his failures, in spite of the most careful study and prescribing. And this sentence is a very important sentence from all of you. It happens that many times you select very perfect remedy depending upon your knowledge, depending upon your case taking, depending upon efforts which you have taken into consideration for treating that patient. And sometimes it happens that even well selected remedy never works. Because many times it happens that remedy might be correct, but potency might be different. There is no satisfaction in asserting that it is the failure of the prescriber. It is unsatisfactory to accept the statement that variation in the living conditions may be the cause. Very important thing which he is explaining. What he is saying, there is no satisfaction in asserting that it is the failure of the prescriber. It is unsatisfactory to accept the statement that variation in the living condition may be the cause. There are lot of variations in every individual's life. Many people lives in a different manner. There are many habits the people are having. If the patient who is consuming a tobacco day and night and you start your remedy, even though he has stopped, it is patient has become so benumbed with the help of that tobacco poisoning that the action of the medicine you cannot get many times. For another person, single dose is sufficient. Here, after repetition also, you are not getting anything. So this is one thing one must understand, that variation in living conditions may be the cause. We can allow a margin for hereditary tendency, and again for psychic or other forces which we understand too little, that govern the threads of our lifespan. See what he's saying. He's saying that every person is different. Everyone's hereditary tendencies are different. Everyone's psyche is different. Everyone thinks in a different manner. Everyone's susceptibility is different. And that's why there are definitely variations after giving a medicine, even though it might be quite right medicine. Those possibilities happens because you are dealing with a dynamic human being with a dynamic remedy. We can allow a margin for the hereditary tendencies and again for psychic or other forces which we understand too little, that govern the thread of our lifespan. But beyond all this, there are factors in the variation of the remedy action that we are unable to understand. We may say that statistical laws authorize us to expect certain results from those dynamical laws which we attempt to utilize. That in turn, these statistical laws presuppose conditions pre-existing and perhaps unknown to us. But we may say with more truth that our incomplete understanding of dynamical laws causes us to assume statistical laws because it is comfortable and convenient excuse. Our danger here lies in practicing empiricism because of our dependence upon statistical law. Here he is making things very clear in your mind. Very, very clear. What happens since from the KG we start learning the statistical laws, we start learning mathematics, we start learning 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we start learning additions, and we started doing the addition. Then we know that 1 plus 1 is equal to 2, 2 plus 2 is equal to 4, and this is what we learn. Then we start subtracting. So all those things, the laws, mathematics, and the statistical laws, only we have learned. It has been not taught right from the birth till we enter into the homeopathy, the dynamical laws, the dynamic mathematics. It is not possible. And what happens when we enter into the homeopathy, the confusion starts happening. We feel that 1M is more stronger than the 30 because 1M means 1000 and 30 means 30. 1000 is more than 30 and we consider that it is more stronger, more medicine is there. We don't know that it is exactly the reverse. The difference we don't know. And there is a confusion which starts happening. Many students of homeopathy doesn't understand this. In fact, I have seen that even many homeopaths themselves are confused with the potency selection because there are many confusions in their mind. And the problem is not there. Problem is that since childhood we have learned only statistical mathematics. We have learned statistical laws. And when we learn homeopathy, we apply the same statistical laws to this dynamic condition. How can it be possible to not to get confused? We must get confused unless we understand the thorough understanding. Many times, as the patients, many times I have asked many of my home colleagues or even students, which potency is the strongest potency in your homeopathy? And I have seen that many times answer is always from the students or homeopath, it is 50 millisimal potency. Because they think that 50 millisimal means 50,000. It's more stronger. We never understand the science behind that potency. We never understand exactly how much strokes are used in preparing the 50 millisimal potency. What is the dynamics behind that? We never understood the centesimal potency and how many strokes are given in centesimal potency and what it makes change. We never understand the decimal scales potency. We are rather confused at a level because we are applying the same laws of statistics to the homeopathy. It is too simple if we understand the science behind that. When we prepare the decimal scale, the proportion of medicine is 1:10. When we use the centesimal scale, the proportion of the medicine to the vehicle is 1:100. And when we prepare the 50 millisimal scale, the proportion of medicine is 1:50,000 of the vehicle. If we calculate in such a manner that if we take 1 gram of common salt dissolved in 10 drops of water, 1 gram of common salt dissolved in 100 drops of water in another bottle, and 1 gram of common salt dissolved in 50,000 drops of water. Which is the strongest solution? Out of these three, which is strong solution and which is the mild solution? Most mild solution is 50,000, where you have dissolved the same amount of common salt. And there is no comparison between the 10 or 100 with the 50,000. So definitely we can say 50,000, 1:50,000 is the most mild potency in your homeopathy. And that's why it is rather safe to utilize, if we understand the concepts. Now question arises that how out of decimal and centesimal, which is the strongest? Here again, the confusion rather develops over there in our mind, because we immediately materially calculate that yes, 1 gram in 10 drops is stronger than 1 gram in 100 drops. But we don't consider that how many strokes we used to give to the decimal scale and how many strokes we used to use when we prepare the centesimal. When we prepare decimal, we used to apply the force externally only with the 10 succussions. So force applied is much less in decimal as compared to centesimal, where you apply 100 strokes. So definitely the energy which will be developed in centesimal scale is much higher than the energy in the decimal scale. And the most strongest potency in your homeopathy is the centesimal scale. If this becomes clear in our mind, then we can say to the world definitely. But there is rather confusion in ourselves only, because we are applying the same laws of statistics to the laws of homeopathy. And this confusion he tries to clear over there in this chapter. So we'll stop over here. We'll meet tomorrow and continue with the same thing. But I think it has become rather simple for you to understand the potencies now, if our concepts are very clear. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Have a good evening.